Hello, everyone. My name is Lyndon Carr. Welcome to Free to Be. Free to Be exists in order to collect people's stories because we believe that the telling of our stories helps other people find freedom. And so today you're going to hear from a very special guest, a friend of mine. His name is Will, and he's going to be talking about a little bit of his hometown and his upbringing, as well as just life transitions and just kind of what his next steps are in terms of higher education and social justice. And so I hope that Will's story can impact you, and Will would love to get connected to you if his story is impactful. Thank y'all so much, and catch you soon.
Happy Wednesday, party people. My name is Will. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm super excited to share a little bit more about my story. I have been living in Atlanta for the past year or so. I moved here in the summer of June of 25. So I'm coming up on my 1 year anniversary. So it's super exciting to be here in Linden Space, recording this little video to share more about who I am and sort of where I've come from. So I'm going to tell my story in three parts. The first part is going to focus on my hometown with some insight about where it was I was born and raised. The second part is going to focus on my time through school. And then the third part is really going to focus on what I'm currently doing and what I would like to be doing in the future. So I am still a newbie here in Atlanta, but I got to Atlanta through a series of travels that have started in a small town in North Louisiana called Winfield. Winfield is where I was raised. I was born not too far away from Winfield, and I'm one of eight. So I'm from a huge family, and my little small town community is really where I learned that community is really important, and that community is something to be valued. But being from that small town, it's a town of about 4,000 people. I also realized very quickly that I did not see myself staying in that small town forever. And I learned that in high school. So during my time in high school, I was super involved. I was on the football team. I did the statistics for the basketball team. I was involved in FBLA, FFF, FFA, and these other organizations that really gave me the opportunity to really travel the country and see all of these different places. I took my first flight to compete at the national level for FBLA. We went to Chicago and we stayed at the Palmer House. And so I remember walking the streets of Chicago for the first time at 16 or 17 years old, being really excited about the future that I could have in a place like Chicago or anywhere that wasn't my hometown. Since that flight to Chicago, I have traveled a lot. So even before I started school, I've gone to Anaheim and Los Angeles. I've been to San Francisco. I've been to Washington D.C. and Seattle. I spent 3 weeks in Seattle doing a program for Google during the summer before I started undergrad, and so I really had the opportunity. As I said before, to travel and really get a sense of the world outside of my hometown. And to the bright eyed childhood boy that was me at 17 years old, there was something really exciting and magical about being able to travel and see the world. And I really do think that that was sort of the origin story for my interest in travel and why I'm so excited to visit new places and why I'm super, super excited to see different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And it is something that I really do get excited about. And I really do cherish those opportunities to fly and travel and take the train and do all of these different things to see places that I haven't seen before and interact and experience cultures that I haven't been a part of. Now, after high school, my sort of big transition started when I bought a one-way ticket to Richmond, Virginia. It was a Delta ticket. It was $150, and I flew out of Baton Rouge Airport. And I remember it very clearly because the flight was at like 8 a.m. And my parents drove several hours from my hometown to get me to the airport. And it was just such a difficult travel for them that we decided that I would never fly to Baton Rouge ever again if it involved them having to pick me up. But after that, we said our goodbyes in the airport. They put me on a plane, and then I flew to Richmond, Virginia. and I spent 4 years in Richmond, Virginia. I was a student at the University of Richmond, and I have fond memories of the University of Richmond. And the fondest, and what I think is now the funniest, is this idea that I was going to double major in computer science and finance. Yeah, when I started school, I thought that I was going to code and do software and hardware and do investment banking and manage people's money. Long story short, that didn't work out. My first semester as a college student was pretty rough academically. I'd gotten the lowest GPA that I'd ever gotten in my life. I struggled through the calculus class that I had, and for the first time in my life, I was so okay and so happy to get a C. I think I got actually a C minus in that calculus class, and when I tell you that I think that C minus was just my professor being kind to me. I struggled so much with calculus that I was just happy to not have to take the class anymore. I was going to office hours. I had a tutor that had taken the same class the year before, and I was doing extra practice problems and still struggling. And so I just decided that computer science wasn't going to work out because it involved taking more math classes, and then it also involved just really long hours of coding. Now, don't get me wrong. I know my way around some code. I've programmed in Java. I built an ATM, a mock ATM machine in Java, and that was fine and dandy. But I ultimately realized that computer science and finance was not what I wanted to do, despite getting an A in financial accounting and taking economics, macroeconomics. I realized that the business world wasn't really where I wanted to be. And I also realized that computer science or tech wasn't where I wanted to be. And so I spent a lot of time my first year taking some gen ed courses. I was an English major for a little bit. I took a gender studies class, and then I ultimately ended up being a leadership studies major. And that was a really cool opportunity for me to sort of think about the big questions of leadership um, and to really think about those big questions of leadership through different disciplines such as sociology and psychology and philosophy and English literature and economics. So, really thinking about all of these different intellectual thoughts and pursuits and interests that I had and wrapping them up into a major that already existed. And that was really significant for me because I think at one point I pitched to one of my faculty mentors that I was going to create my own major, and I can laugh about it now because the classes that I wanted to put in that major would have literally had anybody looking at transcripts asking, like, well, what the hell did you do for 4 years? And I still feel that way a little bit. But I do think I got a lot out of the leadership curriculum that I took and the courses that I took and the opportunities to ask really big questions about lots of different things. Also, during my time as a student at the University of Richmond, I realized that I had a deep passion for leadership and for education and social justice and change. I was one of those over involved kids, so I was a part of everything. I was an RA, I was on the student government, I did all the things that all of the traditional sort of student affairs academic people do. And I did that because I really did enjoy it. I really did appreciate the opportunity to sort of be in those leadership roles. And I enjoyed what they taught me about myself and what they allowed me to do for others. Now, because I was involved in all of those things, when I finished my undergraduate degree, that was back in 2021, peak COVID year, um, I was asking questions about what my next steps were going to be, and COVID had put a damper in things. But I ultimately decided that I was going to continue my education by getting a master's degree in student affairs. And so I packed up everything in Richmond, Virginia. And that's so funny because at that time, my senior year, I was living in a house with two roommates off campus, and they were several years older than me. But they taught me a lot about what it meant to be an adult and really helped me with that transition. And I think part of that is why I refer to myself as a zillennial. Like I'm an old soul zillennial because I was living with guys that were 25 and 30 while I was 21. Um, but packed up my room at that house in Richmond, loaded everything up into a U-Haul with some friends, and then I drove from Richmond to Indiana. Indiana University is where I then spent the next 2 years pursuing my master's degree and working in residence life. Now, I realized that residence life was not what I wanted to do, but I still appreciate the opportunity that it gave me to mentor students and to support people with really important and critical needs sort of in that higher ed space, right? That role really allowed me to see that I appreciated supporting other people and being a mentor and being a provider in ways that got people through really tough challenges, right? I was the person that the RAs called when they were having a crisis. I was the one sort of responding to these sort of big deal issues that were happening through the nighttime. And so that role taught me a lot about myself. It also taught me a lot about, what I'm willing to deal with and what I'm actually capable of dealing with emotionally, psychologically, and mentally. And so I really do sort of think about that role with a double-edged sword, so to speak. And so on the one hand, there was, some feelings of burnout, but there were also some really good, on the other hand, there were also some really good sort of experiences and opportunities that came from that. Now, because I graduated in 2023 with my master's degree. And to any of the student affairs folks that might be watching this, that was sort of the great resignation of higher ed. And so this was the post COVID fallout. There were very, very few jobs available if you weren't interested in housing, which I wasn't. And so I ultimately decided to continue my education again by pursuing a PhD at the University of Georgia. And that PhD is in higher education. And that has been an exciting, and it has been an exciting role. Being a PhD student there, it is the beginning of year 4 as part of this program. And I've really appreciated the opportunities that I've had to learn about the sort of deep complexities of how colleges and universities in the United States are ran and managed. Um, there's an answer for most of the things that happen on college campuses, and I ponder about those things. But I'm also really fortunate that this PhD program has given me the opportunity to ask really meaningful questions about the things that matter to me, and those are things that sort of live in the realm of student success. So I tend to ask a lot of big questions about how do we get students to and through college with a particular emphasis on students with minoritized identities. So that is first gen students, that is low income students, that is students with ethnic or racially marginalized identities. And then more recently, I've started to think about, well, what does student success look like after college, right? So if we believe this idea that colleges are sort of set up to prepare people to pursue jobs, to get jobs, to give them all of these different things, we really do need to make sure that we are creating opportunities and creating programs and spaces for students to get those jobs. And so some of my work looks at sort of those or some of those sort of post course outcomes for career placements. In addition to that sort of work, I've also spent a lot of time thinking about the role of students in institutional decision making. And so I spent a lot of time, or have spent a lot of time, thinking about student voice and student activism and student leadership and student representation and all of the intersections that exist between those different phenomena. And I've been super fortunate to be in leadership positions at the University of Georgia that have given me firsthand experience about the way certain decisions are made and how those processes work. And it's been a really insightful sort of experiential opportunity to gain those insights. Yeah, I joke all the time that I nerd out about higher education and the way decisions are made on college campuses, and I spend a lot of time really advocating for students, in particular, to be important stakeholders and components of those decision making processes, because ultimately everything that is a policy decision, I believe will ultimately have some effect on students. Obviously, some things will have less of an effect, but students are sort of the critical heartbeat of colleges. And so thinking about them and their needs and including them, I think goes a step further than some of the historic paternalistic principles that have sort of governed how colleges and universities work. And so now, I'm writing a dissertation. I'm doing this research. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what my next steps are. I feel we're prepared to do a number of different things. I would like to stay in something that is sort of purpose driven. I've started to accept that it doesn't necessarily need to be education or higher ed, but I like to think about my interests and passions in a career as sort of doing for purpose work. And what I mean by that is work that really drives forward social issues or, you know, progressive social solutions to really complex problems. And I want to be a part of solving those really complex problems. So that could be poverty, that could be a lack of access to higher education, that could be a number of different things. But I really do feel that I've gotten the skills and the tools needed to sort of help address some of these really big problems that exist locally and regionally and at the state level, of course, at the national level, and even in the international space. So that's what I spend a lot of time thinking about now, trying to do social justice work in a meaningful way that will allow me to get paid to do it, to support myself while also supporting causes that ultimately change the world. So if anybody has a role sort of in that space, let me know. Super excited to learn more, and really, really excited to think about what that particular interest means for opportunities here in Atlanta. Because although I am a newbie, or a relatively newbie to the city, it's the beginning of my second year living in Atlanta. I have enjoyed living here so much. I found a really great community that I enjoy being in. I love the opportunity to step over into a concert or to go running on the Beltline, or to go to one of the museums. And so I feel like Atlanta is a space that provides me with a lot of what it is I need to thrive. And so I want to channel my thriving back into a community or back into an environment that can help others thrive as well. So that is me in a nutshell. I'm sure I left out some big pieces and some parts, but if you're curious to learn more, please do reach out. My Instagram information is linked, or will be linked in the post. So please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions. I love community and I love interacting with new people. I've also learned that by participating in this, it's really good to share stories. So would invite others to participate if they see fit, to think about what it is you might want to share with the world and let people know who you are. It's been super exciting and wonderful to share my story, and I'm really glad that you all have taken the time to listen.